closely with product managers, account managers, project managers, and other titles that us techies love to hate. And he's here to share with us his perspective on why closing this gap between R&D and business is essential part of DevOps. So please welcome Shahar.
Yeah. Okay, hi everyone, and hello. Thank you, Itai, for the introduction. Okay, so I'm going to start with this really lousy, low-res diagram here, which probably most of you can't read, but it's important. It first appeared in a post by Patrick Dubois 6 years ago. It was only 2 months after the first DevOps Days conference in Ghent, and it tries to summarize all those important ideas that surfaced during that conference. I'm going to describe it real quick because it's very relevant to what I'm going to talk about. So, okay, so you can see roughly the 3 main organizational units you have in every software company. On the left, there's the business unit. Then there's the R&D unit here. And last but not least, the operations unit. And this was probably the structure of most software companies at the time. And when they had the conference, they tried to think about how you can interconnect between all those units and use DevOps concepts to make operations and business much better. And you can see there's this central cluster here of ideas is all those good stuff that most of us already know about, right? So it's closing the interaction between devs and ops. It's about doing deployments, continuous delivery using configuration management tools. It's about infrastructure as code. We've all heard about it more than once in all the conferences and most articles about DevOps. And what I think is missing from the discourse are those satellite ideas here, down here, and here on the top. Those ideas that connect between the business and the ops teams. And just for example, business should focus on both functional and non-functional requirements. Things like operation teams should organize themselves according to business goals. Those are the kind of ideas that I rarely see in those conferences or in any article, and I think are very important, and I'm going to talk about them today. Okay, so a bit of history. So DevOps is really an extension of Agile, right? The primary goal was to build software faster and better. When I mean faster, I mean shorter release cycles, faster feedback from production, from customers. And when I say better, I mean, with this, keeping a high quality standard in the face of rapid delivery and deployment and development. And those were the ideas behind Agile, and DevOps was an extension of that, and I'm going to show it in a few slides. So the first slide is the typical organizational structure, like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Hopefully no one here in the audience is still using this methodology, which is called waterfall, right? So you have business, you have requirements coming from the business to the product creates all those heavy descriptions of what they want to build, and then they give it to the dev team to implement. The dev team gives that to QA to test. QA signs, approves the solution and gives it to the ops, who all they do is deploy and monitor, right? So this is old school. And Agile came and made a small step, but a very significant one, saying, let's take product, dev, and QA and make them collaborate much better with each other, right? So if you look at methodologies like Scrum, you have cross-functional teams, people from the different divisions working together. and rapid release cycles and all that nice stuff, but still, the ops team is out of the loop, right? Next in line came the lean, which was, again, another extension of Agile, the lean style, which said, okay, that's nice to have those guys collaborate together, but we really need to get feedback all the time from production, from our customers. And they said, and then, release cycles became even shorter. We tried to find different ways to make it, to deploy faster to production, and it's only, and when DevOps came, they said, hey, we can make, and okay, that's awkward because when I did it at home, it was on my computer, and I wanted to show you how it shortens the release cycle. I can't really do it here, but I think it's pretty evident. What DevOps did was say, hey, let's make it much shorter by enhancing collaboration between Dev and Ops. And now, deployment, most of us, I hope that many companies do, continuous delivery. They use configuration management to rapidly deploy to production, and we get feedback much quicker. And it's not surprising that DevOps was mainly focused around how to make Dev and Ops collaborate better, right? Because DevOps, right? It's in the name. But it's not only that. It comes from the roots of DevOps. So this is an analysis by John Willis talking about the ancestors of DevOps. And he said things like, and you have Patrick Dubois and Andrew Schaefer, who created the Agile Infrastructure Team forum, which was actually sysadmins who knew how to code. And they say, hey, we can really ship code faster if we start to code stuff, and if we use our skills better. And at the same time, in Velocity, it was, I think, John Allspaw who came and gave a lecture about how Flickr deploys more than 10 times a day. And as you can see, both of those roots are people who came from the operation units. And it was easy for them, I guess, to just trying to close the gap between Dev and Ops, because those are the kind of people, the kind of people they used to work with on a daily basis. And so that's why I think that for most people, DevOps means how to make developers and IT professionals work as a single unit. And it's okay. It's not a bad concept, but it's simply not enough. For me, DevOps means a set of ideas that help software companies improve the way the business operates. And it's much more than just blurring the distinction between Dev and Ops. Because in the end, it's your product units, product management, and sales who decide whether the business is successful or not. It's not the ops team, it's not the R&D team, it's those guys across the street, across the hall. And when we have miscommunications between business and R&D, we create inefficiencies. Okay? We deliver stuff that we don't really need to deliver. We monitor stuff that we don't really need to monitor. We get feedback about the wrong things, and it's inefficient. So I think that what's happening is that we're actively discussing how we can make collaboration better. This happens all the time, right? I think at the keynote yesterday, he had this diagram on the left, right? How we can try, what's the right topology of the organization to make Dev and Ops work together better, and we get that all the time. But we rarely discuss how we can make Ops and product and sales collaborate around business goals. And that's bad. And I'm going to show just, I'm going to take 2 areas in operations and give some use cases and some examples of how I think I think things should be, how things could be better if we try to collaborate. So the first area is monitoring. In the previous lecture here, it was Ran, I don't know if he's in the audience, it was Ran who said monitoring is not only for ops teams. And he continued and said, you should enable your developers to be able to set up their own monitoring and send their metrics and whatnot. And that's correct. But monitoring is not only for DevOps teams. It's for everyone in the company, and I'm going to show why. So if you look today on all the monitoring solutions that we have, this is a poster that Big Panda created. It's actually a website. You can go inside. It's open source. You can add your own monitoring solution if you have one. But this is a poster where you have only 60 solutions that you can pick off the shelf or clone from Git, open source, whatever, that you can use to monitor your system, right? There are over 60 only here, and there are over 100 probably out there. And I think that the fact that there's so many solutions that you just want to monitor all the things, right? Let's just send everything. Let's monitor applications and servers and network. Let's send thousands of metrics a minute to our key value, to our time series databases, and I think that created this approach for monitoring, which I call the bottom-up approach, where you start by monitoring network and servers and applications, and you try to deduce from those metrics what's the overall system health. The problem with that, or just one of them, I think that maybe the most painful one, is alert fatigue, right? And is there anyone here in the crowd who doesn't have alert fatigue? Raise your hand. Okay. You, come work for me. I want to know your magic. Okay, so it's alert fatigue. Not doing anything. So it's alert fatigue. And why do we have alert fatigue? Because we take tools off the shelf, we install them, we set up, and they choose for us what to measure, right? You install New Relic, it instruments into your application and starts sending like tens of metrics out of the box. Wow, cool. And then you can create alerts on top of that, and and you do that, right? Because you can. And the same goes for every other solution. It's not New Relic specifically. But what happens is they choose what to measure. It's not a conscious choice that we do. So that's the first problem. And because they choose, we get fatigued by the wrong information, right? Non-actionable alerts. I don't know, CPU load, kind of things that we all know and hate. And I'm just trying to understand, what are we trying to do again? So I think what you're trying to do is to answer this simple question. Is our system in a healthy state, right? That's the main question. It's not about how much CPU we take in a specific server or what's the RPM of our application. It's whether the system is healthy or not. And for me, a healthy system is a system that continuously generates value for its users under a well-known set of KPIs. Okay? Values and KPIs. There's no solution out there that can magically know what is your KPIs. There's no solution out there that can magically know what kind of value your application generates. It's not there, okay? You're looking at the wrong places. And what I suggest is to reverse the way we think. We need to do top-down approach. We need to start by thinking about the KPIs. We need to start by thinking about user experience, and we need to understand how those affect the overall system health and not the other way around. And if you accept this approach, if you agree with this approach, then I have a question for you. Who in your organization defines KPIs? Is there anyone here in the crowd who defined KPI for his system? Maybe 1, 2. Was it a business KPI? Yeah? What's your job? Product manager. Thank you. The only one in the crowd here. It's product who decide what generates value, right? It's not R&D. It's not operations. It's product to decide. If your business is around, for example, real-time analytics, and it takes 1 day to become, for those shiny analytics to become available for the customer, you're not giving value. And the only one who can tell you, hey, we need to have a latency of less than X, Y, Z, is product. It's sales, and we rarely talk about sales, right? That decides what generates revenue. Guys, we're building a business here. It needs to generate money. Okay? And they decide what generates revenue. They know what generates revenue. Not R&D. And it's marketing who decides what generates traction, right? Many startups, they work around traction. I think that Facebook, yeah, right? That huge unicorn, they didn't do a cent before the IPO. Okay? So it was about traction. And it's probably marketing that tells you what generates traction and what not. So, again, when you think about monitoring, you need to ask yourself, are you talking to those guys in your organization or not? And if you're not talking to them, then something is really wrong about how you're working today. I'm going to give a simple example of how a good KPI can do miracles. And I'm going to take the example of Netflix. And Netflix released an article about the beginning of the year about their search for a single KPI that would really predict if there's a problem with their main business. And Netflix's main business is viewing, right? That's what you do when you go on Netflix. You view stuff. You view your favorite series or whatnot, or a good movie. And they discovered that if they start monitoring the amount of time, like the number of times that people click on the play button, and it doesn't really matter on which device, they can graph it, and they have a very regular pattern on how people play, and it looks something like this. Okay? This is SPS. Okay, so it's very regular. And if something goes wrong with SPS, then something is really wrong with Netflix. Okay? That's why at Netflix, they have the concept of SPS impacting or non-impacting. An incident, an outage that's not SPS impacting is less important than SPS impacting by an order of magnitude. And it's amazing. Look at the graph. It's so simple. They're collecting one metric, they graph it, they monitor it. They do an awesome job on monitoring it and finding anomalies. I'm not trying to say it's that simple, but everyone can understand this, right? So, for example, this is how an unhealthy SPS pattern looks like. We all understand what's going on here, right? At some point, number of plays goes down below the expected threshold, the expected pattern. That's easy to understand. And this is, I think, what makes SPS so special, right? You have one metric, it predicts everything in your system. It predicts whether your system is generating value or not. It's a very clear KPI about user experience, and it's easy to understand across all the company, whether it's product, sales, your CEO, marketing, whoever, obviously R&D and ops, everyone can understand it, and it's amazing. So the question is, and I'd like to argue that the only way you can get those KPIs and the only way you can reach that level of quality is if you start communicating with those guys that know what those KPIs are. So that's the first example. Now I'm going to talk about a different area, which is capacity planning, right? Who doesn't do capacity planning? Who does capacity planning for his system? Okay, right? Yeah, many people, right? Most of us here. We also try to do capacity planning in Big Panda. And what I'm going to tell you right now is a true story of a feature that we released recently. So I'm going to give a few words about Big Panda. So Big Panda is we're a SaaS solution. We aggregate alerts coming from different monitoring systems, and we do smart correlation around those alerts. More importantly, we're multi-tenant. We're deployed on the cloud, and it's going to be important for the next example because once we develop a feature and we deliver it, it goes to all our customers. Okay, so if we open it, if we remove the feature toggle, it goes to everyone. And we recently developed a new feature called Big Panda Analytics. Okay, it lets you gain insight into your alerts data, so you can see which alerts are more noisy than relative to other alerts. For example, and up until recently, it was in beta. So we feature toggled it. We enabled it only for a selected set of customers, and we got feedback, and it was very cool, very cool. And and it's important for the next slide, it's built on top of Elasticsearch. I guess that most of you are familiar with that solution. Okay, so what happened 2 months ago? 2 months ago, I have this conversation with marketing product. They're saying, hey, we want to do PR for analytics around the end of September, just a week ago. And I said, okay, makes sense. But we need to run some tests first. Let's talk about KPIs. And two good things happened here. The first one, which might sound trivial, but it's not, marketing actually came to us and said, hey, we're going to do PR about a feature in 2 months from now, which means we need to GA it, right? It has to be available to everyone. So that's the first good thing that happened here. The second one was that when we came to product and said, hey, we need KPIs, they did two things. They said, okay, let's prioritize it higher and let you work on understanding whether we can GA that stuff. And more importantly, they gave us a KPI. Wow, magical. Yes, there was a KPI. We had to be able to do queries in a very short time for a number of concurrent users, for different organizations, of course. So that was the good thing that happened. The bad thing that happened is that we did our test, we ran our tests, and query latency was okay, but we had a bit of a problem. So apparently, a high number of shards in Elasticsearch per node compromises cluster health. So just a few words about Elasticsearch. Sharding in Elasticsearch means a way of splitting the data across different nodes in the cluster. Okay? So depending on your index model and your object model, the number of shards could vary. In our case, it was very, very high. And something bad happened here. Okay. This was supposed to be a slide of me saying, what? Okay, but ignore that. So, when I heard about this problem, that the high number of shards, I said, okay, it's tough, but we'll find a way to solve that. And there were many possible solutions to that problem. One solution was to say, okay, let's gradually add customers instead of enabling it to all customers. And the problem was that once you do a PR, you can't let people sign up and not see the feature, right? So at least all those people who sign up should see the new feature. And more than that, the sales organization came and told us, listen, we also need to enable it to around 200 customers. Yeah, we can't do 200 customers at this point. So that wasn't really an option. We couldn't really onboard them gradually. And so we went to other solutions. So, okay, let's add more nodes to Elasticsearch, right? More nodes in Elasticsearch, less charge per node. Sounds easy, but we're a startup. More nodes cost money. They cost complexity. And at this point, it just really didn't make sense to add more nodes. So we said, okay, let's change our index configuration to create less shards. And again, very legitimate, but we had a problem with that it would affect SLA. For example, we could say no one has replication. There's no data replication. In Elasticsearch, the number of shards goes down by the number of, divided by the number of replicas you wanted in the first place. So we affect SLA. And so the problem was that there was no straightforward technical solution we could use. There was no other way other than communicating all the issues that all stakeholders have and working with clear numbers and SLA in mind and agreeing on what are the business goals and technical limitations to solve this problem. There was no other way other than collaborating with each other and collaborating with product and sales. Eventually, the solution was to create 2 tiers of SLA according to the customer's plan. So if you're a paying customer, you get replication and better performance by getting more shards. If you're not a paying customer, you're on a trial, then you don't get any replication. And you get only 1 shard. That's okay. You're probably going to be in the system for 21 days, 30 days, depending on the trial. You're not paying us. So that's a legitimate solution. And the only way we could get to that solution was to have sales agree that this is what they are selling, right? They are not selling for when they go to customers and they say, okay, now buy our product, and they ask them, what do we get? This is what they're selling. They're selling reliability and performance. And so everyone was very happy because product and marketing got their feature launch on time. Sales didn't have to lose any opportunities. And for us, it meant no midnight pager duties. So everyone was happy. And again, it was only because we cooperated. So when I called this presentation, DevOps is dead, long live PanOps, what I was trying to say, it's not only about dev and ops. We need to try things differently on how we do stuff in our organization. It's about everyone, okay? It's about product, it's about marketing. Your CEO should probably at certain points should be involved. It's about everyone. So this is me giving you a wake-up call. If you are a product guy, you need to provide non-functional requirements. You need to translate business value into clear KPIs. That's part of your job, okay? If you're a sales guy, is there a sales guy here? Okay, forget about it. No, I'm kidding. If you're working with sales guys, go to them and say, if you're a sales guy, You need to understand that they're not only selling features, they're selling reliability, they're selling security, they're selling disaster recovery, right? And they need to align their business goals with the operational constraints. How many companies here, how many startups sell 5 nines to their customers? 5 nines. You do. You sell it, exactly. It's in the contract. Okay, you sell it, but can you give 5 nines? Okay, you can't give 5 nines. If there's someone here who can give 5 nines, I want to hear about it. I don't believe you. How much is 5 nines if you take it a week?
If you count it by year, it's about 5 minutes a year.
5 minutes a year of downtime.
That's not enough time to wake up.
Yeah. Facebook had more than 5 minutes, I think, like 2 weeks ago, right? Google had more than 5 minutes at various points. No one is giving 5 nines, and yet sales sell it. And they don't really need to. We're not selling 5 nines. And if you're in the dev or ops team or whatever you call it, you need to drive collaboration not only internally. You need to insist on working with business goals. It's also your responsibility, okay? Don't expect, you see, there's only one product guy in the house. There's no one from sales here. Don't expect them to understand that they need to give you business goals, to give you KPIs. It's your responsibility to go to them and ask for it. And if you're a kick-ass engineer, we're hiring. So you're welcome to come to me afterwards and we'll talk.
Thanks, Shahar. Questions? Yeah, questions. No one?
Your name is Big Panda, but the panda here is quite small.
So one question about the reason for using Elasticsearch. Do you provide, don't you know the analytical question in advance? So you could do it at night, MapReduce, something like that, then you can scale more easily,
Yeah.
other than add more CPUs.
Yeah, so we had to choose between, when we started building the platform, we had to choose between being very very limited to the kind of use cases we can answer, and between being very flexible, right? Because it was in beta, one of the purposes was to get feedback from the customers, what kind of reports they expect, and to be able to iterate fast over that to see if we could give them something valuable. And that's why we didn't go for the pre-calculated reports, but rather let's put it all in a silo and then build aggregation on top of that. But I agree that performance-wise, if you know your use case, this is a much better approach. Yeah.
Finally, someone not from the front line.
So you gave a lot of examples about KPIs for production environments and online environments. I was wondering if you do KPI monitoring or KPI-based monitoring for development environments or environments that the KPI in front of the end user is not so easily defined, or yeah.
I'm not sure I understand that last section.
Then answer the first one. Do you do KPIs for development environments or staging and not customer facing necessarily?
No, we don't. But why should we? No, my money doesn't come from development or staging. It comes from production.
It comes from running the software, which goes eventually into production.
Yeah, so we measure our KPIs on, for example, we have staging environments where we measure our KPIs and see if we can, if by doing certain changes we can give a better KPI, but eventually what happens in production is the real number, right? You can read, there's a really good blog post. We actually invested like 2 months at creating, we use Ansible in-house to deploy all our data center. We can just create a new data center in 20 minutes in a different region in AWS. It's easy. It's one click. And we invested 2 months in creating a performance testing environment in another region to see if we can scale out to actually handle all those KPIs, all those future KPIs that we're going to give. And it was a great experience. We wrote a simulator. We measured everything. It was a kick-ass experience, but it's never going to be like production. You're never going to simulate production as well as production simulates production. There's no way it's going to happen. And worse than that, if you're only going to measure those performance or staging environments and not going to migrate everything you do to production, you're just kidding yourself. So you can measure on dev, you can measure on staging, but you need to measure on production. You need to work with that. And what maybe?
Can I have a follow-up?
Yeah.
So what I was aiming for was not necessarily production versus staging or versus development. I was more aiming for, did you find a way to do a KPI-like measuring in not online systems that are not customer-facing, let's say internal infrastructure systems that are production but not production customer-facing? That's what I meant.
Yeah.
How do you define the KPIs there?
Okay. Did everyone hear the question? No. Okay. So we asked whether we measure, whether we use KPIs not only for customer-facing application, right, but also for internal applications. So I'm not sure if you're referring to internal application things that are used only by the R&D team or in general. So yeah, we have for example, we have our data pipeline, which is completely internal. It's not customer facing, but it does affect the user experience of customers. And yeah, we actually started by measuring that because that's more important than whether the front end is. It's not more important as important.
How did you measure the user experience from within the company?
I'm sorry to cut you off, guys, but I really want to give another question, and we're just going to go to lunch. So I encourage you to continue that after.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Howdy. Something you said that resonated was the idea that you're not selling 5 nines.
Right.
However, in my case, for example, the customers will ask our salespeople, well, do you offer 5 nines? And their response is, absolutely, we offer 5 nines. And I say, problem. And they say, never speak to a customer ever again. Thanks. So this ties back to the keynote this morning, but how do you effectively negotiate and communicate that with salespeople to a point where they don't just cut you out of the process?
Okay. So I agree. I'm lucky. Okay. I have the products. Our VP product. When he came like 6 months ago, I think it was 6 months ago, right? He asked me, how fast can we go back, for example, for when there's disaster? Okay. Or what kind of what's our availability? And I told him, okay, it's this and that. And it's not 5 nines. And he said, okay, let me talk with sales. And we sold that. We experimented, right? We went to customers, big customers, and told them, we're not going to give you 5 nines. We're going to try to give you, I'm not going to say our SLA here, but we're going to try to give you something, something, something. But we commit to that, okay? And we're going to refund you if we're not going to deliver that kind of quality. And they were, yeah, okay, I'm okay with that. And I'm not sure if it will hold for next year when we get much bigger, but at that point, we won't be a startup anymore. We'll be, I hope, the engineering team will be much bigger, and might be able to sell more than what we sell today.